An economic revolution. Throughout history, there have been many revolutions that you guys have studied and looked at, and they've all been kind of violent. This one is going to be an economic revolution in the way they changed their economy. The English government was pro business. Entrepreneurs are now a part of the government thanks to the Glorious Revolution. You have to remember, after the Glorious Revolution at the end of the English Civil War, that the middle class people, business owners, were allowed to be a part of government. So they are a new strong factor because they are the ones that have money. And as you can tell in the world today, money influences everything. There were two main parties in the government: the Tories, which were the old school rich landowners, which were like the aristocracy, and the Whigs, who were the middle class business people. What's interesting is these two parties still actually exist in England today. Uh, they follow the economic policy laissez-faire. That's a key term that you're going to need to be able to remember throughout not just this course, but the rest of the social studies curriculum in high school. Laissez-faire economics. The simplest term for laissez-faire economics means the government does not interfere in the economy. That means the government doesn't put in laws to restrict things, doesn't put in laws, rules, or anything like that that restricts it. Okay. Business and industry would be free as possible from government control. They believe that competition and self-interest would provide the greatest good for the greatest number of people. People were free to pursue profit without too many government regulations. This is in a way like a free market economy, also known as capitalism. You guys have all heard the term capitalism. Basically, capitalism means, hey, if you want to be successful, you work hard, you can be successful. That is generally the terminology that they're following. And they believed that wealth would benefit everyone in society. If everybody had wealth, everybody could buy things. But again, as we know through history, does wealth actually go to everybody, or is it just still a select few? You even look at today with the protests about the 1% making like 75-80% of all money, whereas the rest of the society doesn't make it. They would benefit everybody in society. Without regulations, business owners could keep wages low and working conditions bad. So without any government regulations, they could keep pay for people down to very, very, very low wages, and then there would be no working conditions. Basically, they could have any working conditions they wanted. They could be very dangerous. They could be very unfair, things like that, right? New technology. New technologies greatly improve the industrial process. You have to remember, look at the new technology they used in farming and how it changed farming, which would lead to all these people moving to the city. Well, new technology also affects the business people. The textile industries, coal, iron industry, ceramics, and many fields completely changed those industries. So, in other words, new ways of doing things completely changed things and made it easier to make things, cheaper to make things, and they can produce it in large quantities. The steam engine also helped change how things were done. Textile industry. Textiles are cloth, and cloth products helped make England into a rich and powerful nation. They're made from wool or silk or linen from flaxseed. Britain's climate and geography was suited for raising sheep. So if they could raise a lot of sheep, that means they can get a lot of wool. If they can get a lot of wool, that means they could produce a whole lot of clothing. Enclosure made it possible and profitable to maintain huge herds of sheep, because once you move all these people off the farms, that gives you more land. That means you can raise more sheep, and if you raise more sheep, you can produce more wool. More wool you produce, the more money you make. You guys kind of get the picture. The wool was high quality and high demand throughout Europe. A lot of the wool that was being used, they had actually brought in from different sheep from around the world to help them make it easier. That's again where the colonies came in and played an important part. Textile industry was a driver for the colonies. Wool would be brought in from the different colonies as well, so they'd produce wool in different colonies and bring it to England to be manufactured. Many important inventions in the early industrial revolution had to do with making cloth. John Kay invented the flying shuttle, made production faster, but the supply was not there. So basically, John Kay sets it up where you can have a whole bunch of different pieces of string, wool that were ready to be weaved, and the flying shuttle basically allowed it to be thrown across a whole bunch of different strings. Instead of doing one, two pieces by hand, you now could do like 100 pieces of string, just throw the shuttle across. But one of the biggest problems with John Kay's machine was the supply was not there. So you get a guy like John Hargreaves who invented the spinning jenny that allowed many threads to be spun off at once, creating more supply for the shuttle. In other words, instead of having it just one person doing it by hand, now you had a machine that can make things easier. As you can see here is an example of the flying shuttle. You can see all the string, that multi-layers of string being hung there, and on the right hand side you can see an example of the flying shuttle where they'd put a spool of string into the shuttle, and that would be just in a way slid across, and as it slid across the string would be let out, and that would help with the weaving process. The spinning jenny, as you can see here, the bottom part there is where you can see all the wool being strung. You put the wool at the one end, spin that wheel by hand, and what it would do is move the machine. That machine would stretch out the wool and make the threads. Richard Arkwright, creator of what they call the water frame, was another way of spinning yarn that was faster than the jenny, and the yarn was stronger. It used rollers to do things, as you can see on the bottom right hand side there, and you can see the wheel on the left hand side. That's what they used to spin the wool. Samuel Crompton improved the jenny and the water frame by combining the best of both machines. You can see how one person had an invention and then other people would just tweak or make improvements on those inventions to make them even better and more productive. That's kind of like the whole model of the Industrial Revolution. One guy would come up with an idea and other guys would then turn around and make it better and make it easier. And if they can produce more wool, that means they could have more flying shuttles going. More flying shuttles meaning they could produce more clothing to produce. That means they could sell it to more people that could buy it cheaper. You can see how things just kind of steamrolled. This all led to other inventions, with the mule, water frame, and jenny all producing large amounts of yarn looms were becoming even bigger. As they became bigger, they can no longer be run by a person, so machines had to be used. With the big machines came big buildings to house them and the laborers to run them. What you have to understand about these machines being built is the bigger they are, the harder they are for one person to operate, so now they need to figure out a way to use the mechanical things to get them to move. Many industries started to become dependent upon secure source of power. Those close to the water could use water wheels, but still factories are limited by the amount of power. Water was always a problem in mines, so Thomas Newcomen created a machine to pump water out of the mines. He used a compression steam pump to pump water out of the mine. The engine did not work very well, however, James Watt took the idea and made it even more efficient. Here's an example of Newcomen's machine. As you can see here, on the right hand side is where they boil the water. The water would push up the piston, which would pump on the left hand side, put the pump down, and then after the steam was released, the weight of the piston would come down, and that would make the machine come. And you can see how it made it so it goes up and down, up and down. As it was going up and down, they were able to pump water out of the mine. James Watt's steam engine, basically what he did is he took the same idea as Newcomen's and put a wheel attached to it, and as you can see on the left hand side here, that's where you can see here they attach it to the wheel, and as the pump goes up and down, this turns the wheel, and then you attach like a belt to that wheel, and you can attach different things to it. So you can see the basic workings of an engine. Now the same idea is still what drives cars today. Obviously it's been modified and adapted, but it's still in place today. Iron and coal. Industry began to grow thanks to James Darby's invention for cast iron. It could be used for things like pots, pans, support bridges, all kinds of different use, but it was cheaper and easier to make. Therefore, if it's cheaper and easier to make, they can produce more things and sell more things. Soon, huge factories were being built to help these operations. The coal industry was closely linked to the iron industry because coal was used to make the cast iron. So if they wanted to make more cast iron, they needed more coal. The steam engine also used coal, so its demand grew. So not only were they using coal in the iron industry, but they also used it to produce a steam engine. So the thirst for coal began to grow and grow, and that's where England had a monopoly at the time, because they had huge streams of coal in the country, plus many of their colonies had access to coal. People also used coal as a heat source now, so again the demand for coal went up. Mines were usually far underground and dangerous. Many of the employees suffered from something called a black lung from breathing too much coal dust. So here's a side effect: you need all this coal to be produced and mined out. But as the stuff was being mined, many people, because they don't have respirators, then they didn't realize what the side effects of the health. So over time, many people started to become more and more sick. But again, thanks to laissez-faire economics, there was no regulations put in place where the guys had to wear masks or different things like that. And thank you very much, and that's the end of today's slideshow.